Despite the fact that the Backrooms definitely isn't the most popular topic I work with on this channel, since, I'll use Marvel characters and Pokemon and Minecraft, I think this might actually be one of the most approachable series I'm doing on the channel, because you don't actually need any specific knowledge base going into this to enjoy the story and artwork. Though, admittedly, it probably is more fun for you if you know stuff about the Backrooms and the entities that I'm adapting into supervillains stuck in BackCells Prison. But I have been so lit up creatively by going through Backrooms community-driven lore to write the story for these episodes, and I've got a lot of plans in mind for it, including a definitive ending, though whether or not that ending comes in 2 episodes or 10 episodes will depend on whether or not I can make the story good enough that you all want to keep watching for a long time. I'm gonna keep doing my best, but either way, I definitely think you're all gonna enjoy this next chapter. So let's get into it, shall we? Let's go! Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show. Day 15, trapped in BackCells Prison. Even though it's only been 1 day since my last entry, an insane amount of stuff has happened. A lot of it was really freaky and horrible, but the few good things might have made it all worthwhile. Maybe. After that psycho moth lady almost killed me in the old school hotel looking level I was on, and I discovered that the glowing green stuff I can emit from my hands can heal me with enough time, I took a quick nap to regain some energy, then woke up to the sound of footsteps headed towards me. I probably should have hidden, but I just jumped up and threw my glowing fists up in front of me. At first, I couldn't see anything, even as the steps were getting closer and closer. I was looking all around trying to figure out where the sound was coming from until a voice just spoke out of nowhere. "Oh, I apologize. This must be dreadfully confusing to you, my boy." Then, like 10 feet in front of me, a guy just suddenly appeared. I think he must have had invisibility powers or something, but I never really saw him use it again, and it's not like that was the weirdest thing about him. He was decked out in much cleaner looking supervillain clothes than a lot of the other freaks I'd seen in here, and he stood tall and had a sort of snotty vibe about him, which is weird how quickly I picked up on that considering his head was literally a big squishy squid. Obviously, I wasn't planning on trusting this guy right away since everybody else down here had basically tried to kill me, but he did a decent job relaxing me at first. He was friendly and didn't get too close to make me think he'd attack me. He introduced himself as Gentleman Bestar. I still don't know if that's a villain name or what, but anyway, he asked me how a kid like me had gotten stuck in BackCells Prison, and I told him some of the truth, that I didn't really know much. I left out the fact that I'd only gotten my superpowers 2 days before clipping into this place, though. I was smart enough to know that he could still be a threat, and I didn't want him to know how little I knew about my own powers. When my guard was down enough, I asked him if there was any way out of this place. He just kinda drummed his fingers together for a sec, then said he'd make me a deal. He said he ran a sort of show on this level to entertain the inmates to try and keep them from spending their time wreaking havoc. He said if I joined in on the show, he'd answer whatever questions I had. I asked him what kind of show it was, and he kept it a bit vague, and now I get why, but he said it was a sporting competition, and for each round that I'd won, he'd give me more answers, such as where to find the key. He didn't tell me anything else about what this so-called key was, but just hearing the words key made me way too eager to take the deal without asking any more questions. That's probably what he was going for now that I think about it. I agreed, and he did something kinda weird that I still don't really get. He tapped a finger onto his forearm, and it didn't do anything. Then he looked sorta frustrated and mumbled something about a force of habit. Then he just turned and led me down the hallway. I followed him across the level, and the hotel sorta turned into more of a boiler room sorta look. Kinda like the level where I'd gotten chased down by Smaella. He brought me to this big armored door and turned the latch. As it opened, the sound of a mumbling crowd from inside suddenly turned to cheers. I peeked my head in to see that I was on the ground floor of a makeshift boiler room fighting ring. Above and around it were a few dozen inmates all banging at the cage that domed over the arena. Lining the outside of the ground level of the ring were a bunch of smaller cages with other people inside, some of them looking really beaten up. I was about to pull back and try and rethink this deal when Bestar suddenly shoved me into the ring and slammed the door shut behind me. But let's be real, I really should have seen that coming. For the first few minutes I was in there, I was just standing in the middle of the ring, looking around for any way out as the crowd above me lost their minds. I eyed all the cages lining the arena to scope out my potential competition if I did have to fight. A lot of them looked as fired up as the crowd despite their injuries, like they wanted to be here. There was a guy who was practically naked and had a bunch of extra arms and legs. There was a lady with crab claws who looked like she'd just come from a rave. Honestly, I wanted to stay as far away from all these people as possible, but I was pretty sure that wasn't going to be an option. There only seemed to be one person not flipping out about my presence. She was this super ripped lady with pink hair who was extra chained up, even inside her cage. She just stared at me with a really sad, almost dead-eyed kind of look. It almost creeped me out as much as the rest of the people. After a few minutes, Bestar took his place in the crowd, and with a microphone he spoke out over everyone else. He referred to me as a special guest who'd no-clipped in just for today's show. The whole crowd got a good laugh out of the fact that I didn't know how or why I'd gotten into BackCells Prison, except for the pink-haired girl who just seemed to get paler and more concerned looking as Bestar spoke. He asked the crowd who they thought I should go up against, and a bunch of names that I couldn't really make out were all shouted. But after a moment of screeching from the freaks above, Bestar said, "I think it's about time we give another round to Hound, don't you all agree?" The freaks lost it again, and suddenly one of the cage doors popped open. I whipped around to see an 8-foot-tall dude who looked like a fleshy werewolf stomping into the arena. He had long black hair covering a bunch of his face, but his eyes glowed through the mess and I instinctively looked away from his gaze. He said in a growling voice that I was too small and would barely make a good chew toy. Part of me wanted to try smack-talking back at him, but I was just concentrated on trying to keep my powers activated. Out of nowhere, he leapt towards me with his fang-filled mouth open. I dove to the ground and did a surprisingly good roll out of the way back to my feet. I threw my hands forward and shot 2 blasts of my green glowy goop at him. One hit his shoulder and the other hit his head. It actually kinda looked like it hurt him, and he for sure roared out like it had. He ran at me again and slashed both his arms towards me. I tried to dodge again, but he cut a claw right across my side. I screamed out and the crowd lost it. I put my glowy hands to my side right away to try and heal it, but at the slow speed I could heal myself, there wasn't much I could get done. I tried to just run away and duck around him while I healed myself. He chased me around the ring and I managed to at least stop the bleeding, but by the time I did, he slashed me again and cut 3 fresh wounds into my leg. I rolled across the ground and slammed my head into one of the cages. He took a second to flaunt his success to the crowd. Yeah, real big tough guy beating up on a kid that's probably a third his age and half his size. I took the time he was giving me to at least heal my leg a bit, when a voice suddenly spoke from behind me. "Stare him in the eyes, kid." The voice was so close it made me jump. It was the pink-haired lady who I could have sworn had been chained up to the wall seconds ago, but was now moving freely in her cage. "The mutt here gets freaked out by eye contact. Stare him in the eyes, then hammer on him with whatever you got." By the time she finished talking, Hound was stomping towards me again, so I really hoped her advice was useful. I got up and just started staring him right into his freaky mutant eyes. It was kinda hard to do, like something in me was screaming to look away, but I just kept on staring. He noticed quick and thrust his head towards me and roared in my face. His spit shot all over me, but I just kept staring him down and used all my courage to actually take a step forward. Surprisingly, he backed off a step, and I realized that the pink lady's advice might actually work. I started doing as the pink lady suggested. I kept staring, lit up my hands, and started punching glowy stuff right into his chest and shoulders and stomach. He swung his arm at me, but slower than before, and I ducked under it easily and punched hard into his elbow. He was freaking out and yelled at me to stop staring at him. I couldn't believe how well this was actually working. Thinking about actual dogs for a sec, I took a shot right at his nose, punching as hard as I could, and I think my powers might have activated, because I hit him so hard that he flopped backwards to the ground. I kept staring him down as he scrambled backwards and shut himself back into his cage. The crowd booed, which really annoyed me. I thought that had been pretty impressive. Didn't matter anyway, Bestar owed me an answer now for that win. I held my hands to my injuries, healing them as much as I could, while I yelled up to him, asking how or why people ended up in BackCells Prison, forgetting for a sec about the key he'd mentioned earlier. I didn't bother asking him to let me go, because I was pretty sure I knew the answer to that. I'd have to figure out a different way out of here myself, and might as well get some answers from him first. He said most people get sent here if they infuriate the wrong overseer, and then he cursed out some guy named Dresden, but I have no idea who that is or what an overseer is, so I asked him if one of whatever those are could get me back out of here, but he said that just counted as me asking more questions, and then he immediately buzzed open another cage. The person that stumbled out next was one of the freakiest freaks I've come across. She had a full face mask and a sloppily painted on smiley face on it. Her hair was made out of yellow slime. Her hands were huge, and in her palms were big toothy mouths. She seemed to be dancing towards me instead of walking. I was feeling kinda confident off that first fight, until I heard banging on the bars of the cage from the pink lady behind me. "Bestar, you scum! He can't take on Funfeist, and you know it!" The squid-faced guy just laughed and said, "Aw, look everyone, the unkillable Kate is going soft on our new fighter." I heard her spit up towards him, but was too distracted by the shifting freak coming at me. She was moving slow, but she raised her creepy mouth hands at me. Maybe this Kate person was just underestimating me, and I could take her. I fired my green bolts right into the mouths and the freak's hands, but they just expanded and swallowed the blasts whole. She chuckled and said,
"Oh, that was fun! You'll be a great addition to the party!"
I had no idea what that meant, and I was pretty sure I didn't want to. I was about to start running around while I thought of something, until I noticed that she was dragging her left foot across the dirt ground. I thought for a second that maybe it was a weakness I could take advantage of, but then she just suddenly thrust that foot up and kicked a cloud of dust right into my eyes. It burned, and I stumbled back and thrashed my arms trying to keep her away. But before my eyes could even open, I felt a set of teeth clamp down onto my arm. I punched out with my other arm as I tried to open up my eyes, and as they slowly peeled open, I saw that my arm wasn't getting bitten off, but was getting pulled farther and farther inside hers. I quickly started to lose all feeling in it as I punched at her over and over and over again, doing absolutely nothing. I started getting woozy, and my arm was shifting into a yellow leathery texture. The crowd roared out above me. I had no idea what to do. I kicked and punched, but nothing was working. Part of me almost wanted to just give up and let this whole nightmare end, when a cage behind me suddenly got kicked open. A bandaged fist flew past my face and hammered into Funfeist's mask. My arm was released, and I collapsed back to the ground. The pink lady had gotten out of her cage and was hammering her fists into this freak. I didn't know if she had any powers or what, but her knuckles seemed to be splitting as she punched over and over and over again. Her hands were already dripping with blood after a minute of non-stop punches, but she didn't seem to even notice, and she cracked Funfeist's mask as she slammed her to the ground. Kate spun around and raised her leg, then slammed her heel right down onto the mask. It split open, and the yellow goop of Funfeist's hair splattered and painted the ground of the arena. She definitely wasn't getting up after that. This unkillable Kate ran over to me, grabbed my arm, and stared me in the face. She said, "Listen closely. Rumor has it the level people call Fight for Your Life has a key hidden on it. Bestar sent dozens of his minions to try and find it, but they haven't yet. If you do find it and survive, you take it to the end, and you might be able to..." While she spoke, Bestar yelled out through his microphone, "You've sealed his fate now, Caitlin. He could have died gloriously in the arena, but now you've doomed him to be a meal for the Sea Butcher. Transporter!" The last thing I heard was Kate whispering, "Take Anna with you, tell her I'm not coming." Then, out of nowhere, I was just suddenly falling through the air into the ocean. I splashed into icy water. My body shook from the cold, but my wounds burned from the salty waves. For a brief second, I thought I might actually be out of this insane place, but through a sheet of clouds I could see there was actually still a ceiling above me. Even though this ocean looked like it went on forever, it was still a room of BackCells Prison. When the shock of the scene change faded, I started to notice that there were skeletons floating around me. A lot had happened in those last few seconds before leaving the arena, but the name Bestar had said echoed through my mind. The Sea Butcher. Bestar probably could have had any of his freaks in there kill me if he wanted to, so if this was supposed to be some kind of punishment for Kate telling me stuff about the key and the end, then whoever was waiting for me in this place was probably a lot worse than anything I would have faced in that arena. I healed up my wounds, then started to swim, not really knowing where I was going, but just knowing I wanted to get moving. Eventually I caught a glimpse of something in the distance and just started heading towards it. It took an hour of swimming to even get close, but soon enough I could tell it was a house. It was flooded and smashed up, but getting to its porch at least let me sit down and have a rest for a few minutes. But I didn't get to relax long, because something caught the corner of my eye and made me jump. Whatever it was splashed back down into the water near me. I wasn't taking any chances though, so I just spun myself towards it and started shooting tons and tons of my green blasts at the water. "Come try me, Sea Butcher!" I yelled out, trying to sound confident. But something suddenly leapt out of the water next to me and pushed me into the wall, clamping its hand over my mouth.
No, please, be quiet, for your own good.
It was definitely some kind of fish person in a wetsuit, but she didn't look like a killer. She actually looked around my age, way younger than every other maniac in this place. I calmed down a bit, but just as she slowly took her hand away from my mouth, something else leapt up out of the water near us. And this thing looked a heck of a lot more like a sea butcher. She spoke in a gargling voice. "Step aside, Anna. Your company isn't worth losing a meal over." Hearing that name felt like an unusual but much appreciated stroke of luck. "Anna, are you a unkillable Kate's friend?" She replied.
You saw Kate? Is she okay? Has she killed Bestar yet?
I didn't really have answers beyond saying, "She told me how to escape this place and she told me to take you with me and that she wasn't coming." Tears immediately started to well up in Anna's eyes, but Sea Butcher wasn't waiting anymore. She leapt right at me and Anna pushed me out of the way as the freak smashed through the window next to us into the house. Anna turned to me and said,
"This'll sound crazy, but you have to swim straight down until you pass out."
Then she shoved me into the water. Sea Butcher leapt back out the window towards Anna, but somehow leapt right through Anna. Then Anna turned and leapt onto the Sea Butcher's back, wrapping her arms around her neck from behind. I wanted to help, but figured she knew what she was doing better than I possibly could in this place. I started swimming down, really not excited about what I was about to do. In the depths beneath me, I could faintly make out a dark cave. And was that what I was headed towards? I mean, it didn't really matter because I was already out of breath and my throat was on fire. My whole body screamed at me to turn back, but at that point, I wouldn't even make it back to the surface. My vision started to go black, and the last thing I felt was a slippery hand grabbing my wrist and pulling me farther down. I awoke what felt like an eternity later, lying in a damp cave across from Anna. She had a bunch of fresh wounds cut open across her body, but seemed to be ignoring them, and just said to me,
"Please, tell me everything that Kate told you."
And there we have Chapter 2 of The Escape from BackCells Prison. Anyone who's a very long-time fan of the channel and has a really good memory may now actually recognize that not only have I introduced the kid, one of my old original characters, as the main character of this series, but I also introduced the unkillable Kate, who does appear a couple times in my old 20-year sketchbook tour video, and I had planned on bringing her in eventually. If you are enjoying this series, I would hugely appreciate it if you shared it with someone else that you think might enjoy it. As I said, I am going to give this series a definitive ending, but I would love to flesh the story out more and have it run a bit longer, and that'll be more justified if there's more people into watching it. And of course, if you're new to the channel, you might want to check out the first episode in this series, or maybe you'd like my Pokemon as SCPs series. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note, and the thought I want to leave people with today is a little bit more targeted towards people who are interested in building their own business, or their own YouTube channel, or something like that. But it's that true entrepreneurship means giving up what you want now for what you want most. Might be a bit fun to play an hour of video games now, but ultimately taking that hour and spending it on building towards something you're trying to achieve is going to be a lot better for you long term.
I hope that's inspiring to someone out there. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Friday.